grateful that all of you are here. I'm Jennifer Schneider. I am a assistant professor of curriculum studies here at Oklahoma State University, and I'm going to be your MC and moderator for this book launch. So um, before we get started, we'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Because here in Oklahoma, there are many tribes that nations that need to be acknowledged. So we have two land acknowledgements here. First is for the Stillwater campus, because I'm on the Stillwater campus and many of our curriculum studies colleagues are here. So from the Stillwater campus, the College of Education and Human Sciences acknowledges and honors the Kickapoo, the Osage, Pawnee, Quapaw, and Kiowa, and other indigenous peoples' lands who we occupy. And for the Tulsa campus and the city of Tulsa, it sits within the reservation lands of the Cherokee Nation, the Muskogee Creek Nation, and the Osage Nation, and on the ancestral lands of the Osage and the Wichita peoples. So first, Hongyu is going to do some discussion around her book, share with us, and then we'll enter into with our panelists. Our panelists today, we have Dr. William Pinar, Dr. Liesa Griffin-Smith, Dr. Tara Sita, and Gaston Bacquet. Hopefully I pronounced your last name correctly, but Gaston, I not heard you pronounce it, so if I'm off base, please correct me. And then we'll have our panelists speak, and I'll be the timer. So I'll turn it over to you, Hongyu.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Schneider, for the introduction and hosting the session. Thanks everybody for being here. I know it's at the end of the semester, everybody is busy. My special thanks to the distinguished panelists, Dr. Pinar, my mentor of almost 30 years, who has always supported my work. Dr. Sethia for her dedication to nonviolence and nonviolence education for decades. Dr. Liesa Smith, who's a poetic writer and leader, and Dr. Bacquet, who just completed a dissertation on nonviolence in education. So I'll give you a quick overview of the book, and then we can discuss. Nonviolence as a political movement was highlighted by Gandhi and King's leadership. And you can see in today's peaceful protest against the war in Gaza. But for the past 15 years, I have labored on formulating nonviolence as an educational concept. Nonviolence is also a way of life that has existed throughout the human history. So my work draws upon broader concept of nonviolence. And it's not just physical, it includes intellectual, emotional, spiritual, ethical, and structural dynamics for both violence and nonviolence. So the main message of the book is education about for and through nonviolence is imperative for breaking the cycle of violence, while at the same time cultivating compassionate and non-dualistic relationships to transform society. And as an educational concept, I highlight the significance of personhood, interconnectedness, and inner and outer work. We educate persons as educators. And so it's very important for me to see personhood center in education as existential and non-instrumental. I take this notion from Chinese philosophy. So Personhood is never about just a separate sense of the self, but interdependent with others, with society, with nature. And blending the East and the West theory, I approach personal cultivation of nonviolence as integrating the shadow, growing embodied awareness, and transcending the self in the social, cultural, ethical, ecological, political, and spiritual contact. Sometimes Eastern tradition is reduced to inner peace, as if it's self-isolated, but it is a misreading and a reappropriation in the West, because anybody who read Tao Te Ching in depth understand that Wu Wei is about nonviolent governing, resistance against the social norm, and the nonviolent way of life. All of them come together, attuned to the energy of interconnectedness. So if there's anything I take out from international and indigenous wisdom traditions, it is rooted in interconnectedness, whether it is Ahimsa, Buddhism, Ubuntu, and Taoism. All of them are similar with this highlight and the interdependent worldview. So because personhood is grounded in interconnectedness, nonviolence, inner work and outer work are intertwined with intentionality and efforts really centering how to educate and cultivating students to go into that direction for transformation of individuals and communities. What knowledge is of most worth? This is a key curriculum studies question. And as Pinar reiterates several times, in the beginning, when I formulated nonviolence as an educational project, I tried my best to be inclusive and not try to compete with others. But in the Western scholarship, a lot of notions have been already critiqued. A good example is Derrida. He deconstructs Western democracy, justice, along other notions, but in the end, he reaffirms them as yet to come, or as the necessity of living the aporeas. Did I trace back to the Greco-Roman tradition of democratic freedom, which allowed to the use of violence? Even in peace, some politicians use peace to justify war. We heard quite a bit about what peace today, right? So I did and still feel strongly we need to create a different pathway. By contrast, nonviolence rooted in interconnectedness has the inherent mechanism of going against the violence. And you can see it in the notion, in the term itself. And it is a positive force and shifts relational dynamics to mutual well-being. So I would not hesitate today to say nonviolence is my answer. And in education lies the unity and ends of nonviolence. I know that my version of personhood, centering it in nonviolence education, has been criticized as not political enough. And I'm perfectly fine with it, because as an educator, I don't want to subsume education under politics. In fact, nonviolence transcends politics. You can see the quote in Gandhi. It's about transformation of relationship, and other peace and nonviolence leaders, including the educators I interviewed before. Of course, education has a political aspects, but it also has, intellectual, ethical, aesthetic, and ecological aspects. So why should nonviolence education be secondary to politics? Why not reversal? The normative demands on teachers come from many external forces, and the paramount is the corporate interests. For me, external imposition, no matter what form, devalues teachers' work and teachers. I foreground nonviolence in education as an invitation, not a normative mandate. And as a long-term project, it allows students to explore diverse pathways, including beyond nonviolence. Since I was a teenager, it has been my belief that education should have relative independence to serve its own end. So in some of the important threads for curriculum studies, I don't have time to go over all of them, just to highlight a couple. One is as an everyday practice. Nonviolence is not a utopian ideal, but the work teachers and students do every day through different ways of knowing, learning, and teaching. And particularly, we need to pay attention to and tapping into students' integrative capacities, because children actually can have more potentials to creatively resolve conflicts. And if you read the book International Peace and the Fourth Great Achievement, you'll see that. As a positive energy, I don't use the word anti-violence. Neither do I use the word nonviolence with hyphen, because I want to emphasize that nonviolence is more than negating violence. And Nagler make the point that we really need to shift our lens to look at the existence of nonviolence in life, because only critiquing nonviolence, only critiquing violence without seeking new possibilities, however in-depth it is, it can serve the purpose of reinforcing the violence rather than nonviolence. So as engagement with difference, usually commonality is always used for the bridge for making connections, but I always emphasize on engagement with psychical and social differences, simply because usually when violence happens, it is because we see other as different, right? Whether on the school playground or in academic community. But this engagement of difference also is beneficial for realizing the potential and creating different paths. The term engagement means that everybody can change through engagement. So it is not reifying engagement, reifying difference and to make it fixed. Last one that I want to mention, Butler's notion aggressive nonviolence. I really appreciate her insights in affirming the necessity of recognizing and not repressing psychical difference, including aggression. But at the same time, I really also want to focus on transforming aggression through interdependence, rather than just rerouting aggression to another place in another way. It risks reinforcing the Western model of aggression in many different dimensions. And at the same time, I actually would be more worried about repression of compassion and interconnectedness and the desire for affiliation, because that happens all the time as well. So this is the summaries of chapters in the book, because it's more than 10 years. I used all kinds of different series to look at the same phenomenon, and I will and all those series sometimes have tensions, so I negotiate the tensions between all those series to formulate my own vision and my own perspective.
Our first conversation, our dialogue is going to occur between William Pinar and Dr. Hong-Yu Wang. And Hong-Yu, we jumped in and I forgot to read your bio. So we thought we would take a little format where I read the bios of the individuals who are on the panel when you're going to see the individual rather than at the very beginning, because it might help you connect with the person better. So Dr. Hong-Yu Wang's bio here is she's a professor of curriculum studies at Oklahoma State University, Tulsa. Nonviolence education is one of her many major areas of interest as a scholar. She has published numerous books, including Nonviolence in Education in 2014. She recently chaired a conference, which several of you were at, in March of 2024, Awakenings to Nonviolence in Curriculum and Education. And Dr. William Pinar is a Tetsu Aoki professor at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver in Canada. He has taught in the United States and at the University of Rochester and Louisiana State University, where he served as the St. Bernard Parish Alumni Endowed Professor. So I will turn it over to the two of you.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from the ancestral land of the Nooksack people. Congratulations on you upon the publication of this important book. On page 2, you write that, quoting you, in its interwoven threading of the psyche, society, and culture, the book taps into the potential of nonviolence for bridging inner and outer work to cultivate the mutual flourishing of human beings and of humanity and nature. As an educational concept, nonviolence not only orients interpersonal and intergroup relations, but is also central to the personal cultivation of teachers and students that brings creative energy to both individuals and communities. I chose this passage because in condensed fashion, it signals the educational significance of nonviolence, a significance that is, as you acknowledge, simultaneously psychic, societal, and cultural, bridging inner and outer life, thereby in service to mutual flourishings. Well, those are the 3 questions. You can see them, and as you wish. Maybe choose 1 or 2 to respond to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill, for your question. It relates to a lot of things going on in the book. For your first question, in the chapter on unteachable moment, I cited Jeremy Taylor, who discussed through his own experience that the outer work of social justice cannot succeed without attending to the inner work of recognizing and integrating the shadow. And the participants can read that chapter for details. But his key point in terms of the subconscious impacts relationships in complex ways, and how psychical projections sometimes prevent us from truly relate to others in authentic ways. So that's one side. The inner cultivation of nonviolence without engaging the public work is basically inconceivable for me. Even if you can retreat as a hermit into the forest, you're still engaging, nature. So to a great degree, I think the inner work of nonviolence is necessary for the outer work, but it's not in a linear, deterministic way, of course. Well, at the same time, outer cultivation can informs and deepens inner cultivation. It's actually Foucault's assertion that ethical relationship with the self takes priority over the ethical relationship with others. They don't, inner and outer work don't always coincide, that they can have tensions. So they are intertwined, simultaneous, dynamics and complex, but one cannot exist without the other. Pedagogy is a good example of that. Well, regarding the second question, the inner peace, you use the term cultivate inner peace. If it's a cultivate, it already indicates it's a verb in movement. I don't see inner peace as a static state of mind. Even you're a master of meditations, you practice meditation every day. It's not like you can do it one day and then you just get the knowledge or skills. So I prefer to say inner work because it is a exercise and a labor. I don't think I have inner peace, as my mind is often intense, but I do encounter people who have a greater level of inner peace, and I don't see them commit violence when they oppose others, certain actions. They engage the other party in a non-violent way. But I wouldn't say incapable because we all have aggression and compassion inside the self. So it takes work to cultivate the better part of us and make responses rather than reactions. So nonviolence and violence, in my conception for education, is not a binary, but more of a continuum with the intentionality and efforts towards nonviolence. Last question. Let me stop it. Actually, it is Peter Hershock's phrase, human with planetary mutual flourishing. And he's a Buddhist scholar at the East-West Center. I always love that phrase because for me, the mechanism of domination goes across human relations, but also exists between the relation between human and environment. So especially now with the climate crisis, I do think nonviolence is the prerequisite for mutual flourishing, because more than anything else, it can, dissolve the mechanism of objectifying nature or dominating human others. And so it has the capacity to enable sustainable relationships, whether it's a human relationship or relationship between human and planet. So to mutually enabling one another, the tension of life will not go away. So you have flourishing, but you also deals with tension and sometimes deals with violence. But the key is that we don't add necessary suffering for the pain we already have. So yes, to nonviolence as a prerequisite.
All right, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, Anyu. Back to you, Jennifer.
Do you have any follow-up question or?
No, you said it all. You said it all.
Okay. I was expecting you to ask a more difficult question.
Well, I think those were difficult enough. Thank you.
All right, the next panelist is going to be Dr. Teresita and Hong Yu. And so I'm going to read Tara's biography here. Teresita is a founder of the AMSA. Am I saying that right?
Ahimsa.
AIMSA. AIMSA Center. Thank you for the AIMSA Center at Cal Poly Pomona, where she served as the director from 2003 to 2022, and held the inaugural Shantinta Chair of IMSA Studies in 2020 and 2022. She's launched numerous initiatives in nonviolence education, including a minor in nonviolence studies, a biannual conference, teacher leadership institutes that focus on nonviolence. She's published 3 books, numerous articles, book chapters, and review essays. She's received several grants, awards, and honors, including a multi-year grant from the NEH. She holds a PhD in history from UCLA, and she is currently a emerita professor of history.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your introduction. I'm delighted to be part of this panel for the formal launch of this very important book. Hong Yu, first I want to formally congratulate you on your book, and want to express my deep sense of appreciation for your personal and professional commitment to nonviolence. Let me first share some of my comments on the book. After that, I will have a question or two for Hong Yu to address. The book makes a seminal contribution to both the fields of education and nonviolence studies. We already heard from her that nonviolence is an educational concept, but I want to dwell on its significance a little bit more. Nonviolence can be seeded, cultivated, and nurtured through education. That is, it can be taught, it can be learned, it can be internalized, and it can be lived and practiced. Moreover, such education is transformative in nature. Therefore, Wang's assertion is very important that nonviolence is fundamental to all aspects of education, including content and pedagogy. That's the assertion she makes on page 159. The book draws, another strength of the book draws upon multiple sources of ideas and variety of sources of information. These include autobiographical reflections, ancient wisdom traditions, modern and postmodern philosophies, nonviolent studies, peace studies, and feminist studies. What makes the book even more compelling is the way in which Wang connects nonviolence with a number of things, for example, social justice, democratic values, and most of all, as we have seen already, with education in general and curriculum studies in particular. The book reminds me of an aphorism from an ancient wisdom text in Prakrit language. Translated in English, it reads, quote, "First knowledge, then compassion," unquote. This knowledge about compassion or education about nonviolence and nonviolence in education needs to start early on. Therefore, future school teachers need to be trained accordingly. This brings me to the questions I would like Dr. Wang to address. I was intrigued by some of the pedagogical methods and concepts you have employed in your courses on teacher education. For example, to make students understand nonviolence as interconnectedness and respect for difference and otherness, you mention on page 151, assigning in your course an experiential project in nonviolent companionship. As part of this project, each student in your class was required to choose a non-human companion and regularly spend time interacting with it. Hongyu, can you please talk a little more about this project, as I would love to learn about the nature of interaction that ensued between the students and the non-human companions they chose. Please also share the learning outcomes from this project. I have another question, but I will wait if you would like to respond, and then we'll see if we have the time.
Yes, that's a good question. I actually used that experiential project when I first taught the class curriculum of nonviolence in 2013. I think it's a positive effect, really convinced me, and it's really students' work and their own transformation really convinced me about the impact of nonviolence education. And for that particular project, I asked them to take, 6 to 8 weeks of studying for the class to choose the object. I don't like the term object, but really it means that natural non-human being. And so they had no idea what to do with it. I had no idea what to do it, but I wanted to see how it goes in terms of a nonviolent companionship if you infuse the orientation of nonviolence into your relationship. So I still remember that class. So one student chose a bird nest where a bird was basically hatching in the backyard, but another one chose the wind to experience wind. I can't remember, it's at least once or twice every week to have the interaction with it. And there are others who choose flower, choose, they just choose all kinds of different things. And one chose the rocking chair in a coffee shop she loved. And so in the beginning, nobody really expected anything happens, but in the end, they all reached some kind of insights into the relationship itself, to see what they did not see before, to feel what they did not even paid any attention, and also observe the process of birth of the bird, all kinds of those things. And it's just makes them, in terms of outcome, it is really what they have learned from the process that they did not anticipate in the beginning. That was the outcome, but it kind of consolidating their learning from nonviolence class. The key is not trying to control, but the key is to let things emerge and providing companionship rather than interrupting, all the time. And that's what we do as teachers. Sometimes we do interrupt. So that's, and I have been using this as one of the options for the experiential project in many different classes later. So the relationship one can feel with nature, even though nature cannot speak back to us in the same way, it's the relationship itself taught students a lot of things. Yeah, and they applied it to their own teaching in the classroom too. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Do I have time to ask another one?
Yeah.
Okay. Another pedagogical concept you employ is the Jungian concept of shadow, which refers to one's negative or unpleasant side. To embrace nonviolence and its positive force, it is important to recognize and acknowledge one's shadow, so that they are not projected on others. Working on one's shadow, you say, is necessary for creating nonviolent relations. Since such a shift from violence to nonviolence, or from good to the unpleasant, from the unpleasant side to the good, requires an ethical orientation and a concern for the well-being of both the self and the other, my question is as follows. How do we address institutionalized violence, which one might call as structural shadow, reflected in racism, sexism, ethnocentrism, or simply structural violence in general? I would be interested to learn about the challenges you have encountered in this context and the possibilities you have identified for creating a shift from violence to nonviolence. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have two example, without naming students. It's actually interesting. Recently, I learned the other thing because Jungian's concept of shadow usually is negative, the anger, the repressed, the aggression and all of those things. And the integrating those is about being aware and being able to work through it. But Jungian shadow also has another concept, other aspects, that is the unrealized part of you can become the shadow. And so I have, examples from students on both. In the positive sense, the students, because of certain dynamics, kind of repressed the layer of relationship and the desire for fellowship. And through nonviolence studies, integrating that, then kind of elevating the compassion part of that has been really beneficial for the relationship. And the other, the opposite is when they realize there are certain shadow within themselves and try to integrate it, work with it, then it becomes part of them. It's soften the anger and the aggression within, and especially for women teachers and students, usually because of the social norm, we do repress a certain part of the psyche, into the subconscious because it's not allowed socially. So it depends. It really is about the balance between the two forces, compassion and aggression, and how to balance them out. And I really appreciate what you said about the structural shadow, which is so true. And I guess that's part of the reason that education don't talk about nonviolence that much, is the system and the structure itself is very constraining. So it becomes, can play the role of repression and oppression already. So it's difficult to kind of, deal with all of those restriction. I think after post-Jungian theory, they actually really added the middle layer, what they call the cultural unconscious. So individual, culture, and collective unconscious. And the cultural part is really deals with the structural, shadow. A lot of times we don't even know, we don't even understand the system itself, a shadow part of the full humanity. So again, in terms of, because I don't teach pre-service teacher, I only teach graduate students. They already have experiences. So the relevation in terms of the structure itself can be violent and can be the shadow. and to deal with it, it's an important step forward. And as you know, nonviolence as a political concept, it's a grassroots movement. But in education, it can be both grassroots and from top to down, especially because the teacher holds the position of authority. So that goes back to the notion of nonviolent governing, and then in the sense of the teacher play her role even within the constraints of institutional restriction. They still can play the role of helping students to be more integrative of their different elements and different psychic aspects because of the social norms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, we've got Dr. Liesa Griffin-Smith. So following a nomadic childhood living in the United States and Israel, Liesa and her family settled in Oklahoma, where she later began a career in education as an English and an art teacher, working in many diverse educational settings, including public schools, private schools, homeschool co-ops, public charter schools, and continuing adult education programs. Liesa earned her PhD from Oklahoma State University in Curriculum Studies. And for the last 13 years, she has been the lead high school principal at a public charter school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She is also an adjunct instructor, a graduate, teaches graduate courses in curriculum and educational leadership.
Okay, let's see if all of this will work. Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this opportunity and this invitation. I'm going to ask a question in a few minutes about chapter 10, thinking back through our mothers. But before that, I just wanted to share an observation that I had, which was some of the anecdotes, the autobiographical segments that you share, both about your mother and then also your connection with her. I was struck by language of courage, pressing boundaries, facing change, and the courage to advocate for others as both pressure points, but also as threads that you could see in your own autobiographical narrative from your mother and grandmother. And I was thinking about this invitation that came to me to participate, for which I am so grateful. And my thinking is I can see elements of that continuation in the invitation itself being a way of inviting others into your own crossing of boundaries and being courageous. I have seen that work in my own life, the repeated invitations. But the conference that you just hosted is another example of the many ways in which invitations to be, to not settle for the status quo and to push into new spaces, that invitation has challenged me. And I feel like I have, again, kind of a legacy and thinking about that role of motherhood. I thought that I just wanted to share both the way your invitations have been powerful for me and the way I see that as a hallmark. And in chapter 10, thinking back through our mothers, you write, I argue that gratitude that can hold tensions and complexity with a sense of responsibility has the potential for strengthening interconnectedness with others, community, and the planet in ways that erode mechanisms of control and domination. Claiming maternal legacies in gratitude, despite their limitation, in order to challenge patriarchy is a practice of educators' responsibility for co-creating with students a more equitable life within and outside of schools. In this chapter, you closely examine organic relationality through which interconnection integration and tension relationality may be experienced. Could you speak further on your notion of gratitude as you explore it in this chapter, and expand on your observation that the relational nature of gratitude has both strengths and limitations? How do you perceive these strengths and limitations of gratitude?
Thank you, Liesa. Gratitude was the theme of a journal special issue. I don't know if Claudia is still here. It's actually the theme of a special issue, so it wasn't really my own pick. But I'm glad to make the connection between gratitude and claiming maternal legacies. Because in real life and in fictions, daughters always complain about mothers, right? But gratitude suggests recognizing the relationship in a positive way. Thinking back through our mother is a motive of Virginia Woolf, and it was taken on by Mandarin Gourmet. She argued first it is important to follow the maternal line and foreground women's experiences rather than follow the norm of the paternal line. Second, thinking back through mothers is not about identifying or follow her. It's not about negating her either. But it's about making connections for creating one's own womanhood. So gratitude is can be affirmative and can be creative, and it also holds intergenerational tensions. Mother and daughter relationship is complicated and full of contestation. And as Julia Kristeva points out, the social devaluation of motherhood and devaluation of women and femininity can make it more difficult for women than men to get access to feminine creativity. So mothers are certainly not free from imprint of patriarchy, and sometimes can be their carriers. So we needed to critically unlearn gendered norms passed down from them. But in general, mother-daughter is a relationship that we have to navigate, because in Ronin's archetypal theory, you can have nurturing mother, you can also have controlling mother. So it is an issue of balancing things out. But women's creative self-formation cannot be possible when the maternal legacy is marginalized, especially considering teaching is women's profession. And to what degree the formal curriculum and the formal structure always reinforcing the paternal line. And to be able to reclaim mother and its creative maternity is important. And both violence and nonviolence are gendered, as I draw from feminist theory, Janet Miller, Judith Butler, etc. We all see the normalization of male violence in the media, society, and education. It was based upon the denial of dependency and independency on the maternal. So I think nonviolence for both men and women needs to acknowledge our debt to the maternal. And certainly gratitude can be used by officially or by authority to make younger generation to follow the traditional line. So our own self-affirmation depends on being able to disrupt and find and follow our own pathway. But women teachers' self-affirmation would not be accomplished without connected and making connection to maternal lineage. And it's important to broadly speaking about the maternal energy. How can we infuse them into ways of knowing, study, relating, being in curriculum study? So those are all important questions to think about, how to pass on the gratitude to the young children. And as Tyra mentioned, from very young age, rather than pushing that outside of education and curriculum. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think that helps. I think about the autobiographical vignettes in that article, and I think that is what you demonstrate, is especially in thinking about the legacy of your mother that is both strong, but that is also complex, and navigating that point of gratitude, but also recognizing that there is tension there. But that the gratitude allows that point of integration. And I think that that's what's very helpful about thinking about gratitude, is it allows one to see the legacy and to see the power, but then also to integrate within the self the complexity or the shadow relationship with the mother. And I think it's a good model then for the classroom, thinking about teachers as women's work, teaching as women's work, and thinking about the teachers that we know before our own teachers, and perhaps even the ways their work connects to us, and integrating that within us as we become the selves that we are transforming into.
Yeah, thank you. And the courage is the important one. We frame courage in a masculine way, but actually moral courage or ethical courage or spiritual courage is really part of women's life. Yeah. Thank you, Liesa.
Thank you.
All right, and next we have Dr. Gaston Bacquet, and he is from Chile and brings more than 2 decades of experience teaching and facilitating intercultural dialogue, having worked and taught in Saudi Arabia, Myanmar, and Japan. He has a PhD in education from the University of Glasgow. His thesis explored ways to develop inclusive pedagogies informed by different nonviolence philosophies, such as Gandhi's Satyagraha and Buddhism. He is a project leader at Interfaith Glasgow, where he assists in the development of intercultural understandings to bridge gaps of faith through community building. Gaston teaches intercultural communications at the University of Strathclyde and contributes to classes in education and violence at the University of Glasgow.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for Professor Wang for inviting me to your book launch. So I'll share my screen and present with my quote and question. Can you see my screen okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So just to give you some context for everybody, on page 8, Professor Wang, you mentioned that one of the contemporary challenges is to deal with the issue of difference in post-colonial and international society. And you mentioned different approaches from different theoretical perspectives on how they deal with the issue of difference, such as pushing difference aside, or treating difference as a separate unity in a pluralistic way, or essentializing difference as a social identity, and finally, the radicalization of difference into an unknowable otherness. So this is the context that you give us. The quote that I've chosen, you say, all these approaches can be effective depending on the context. Nonviolence situates difference as an organic part of an interconnected life informed by Buddhist non-duality, pointing in a new direction. In this approach, difference is neither negative nor positive, but a component of shared life with great potential to benefit both individuals and communities. While differentiation can be existentially productive, in nonviolence there are threats underlying separations and oppositions, threats that prevent the proliferation of social division and fragmentations. Nonviolence relationality is hospitable to difference. Nonviolence brings conflict back into the organic whole by loosening up the rigid identities and not attaching the ego to a fixed idea or identity. So, with that in mind, the question I have is, given your long experience teaching in higher education and mentoring and advising students in the context of a society as polarized as the US in the moment, what pedagogical and curricular approaches have been effective in A, situating difference as an organic part of interconnectedness, and B, loosening up rigid identities and not attaching the ego to a fixed idea of identity? And the second part of the question, if we have time, is what are some of the challenges you have found in doing this?
Okay, thank you, Gaston, for the question about difference. The most students came into the class believing we needed to seek for commonality in order to have a community, make connections. So to lecture about the importance of difference is not useful because the perspective, will stay. And Tara touched upon this. I did a lot of different ways of experiential project, and really through the experiential learnings, help them understand how difference can exist in their own psyche and in society. Once you understand that and able to integrate different elements into one's own inner world, then it's easier for them to kind of see and understand the role of difference. If you can see the opposites within oneself, then the polarization in the outside world can be more understandable and it's possible to be bridged. One of the things I do is Bill Piner has this career project, which I always use it for the whole semester project for 3-4 months. Go back to the past, thinking about the future, relocating yourself in the present moment. And that really can get a lot of access or things that unrecognized elements out into the open for the students to see. So the other thing is I try to combine different texts. They're diverse, either focusing on autobiographical experience, focus on structure, focus on cultural difference. So even if the book that I don't like, but I think student might like and appreciate, so they experience the different directions in their readings and in their understandings. And ultimately, I'm different from my students culturally and intellectually, and they have to deal with it. I don't know if I'm effective because I've been teaching for nonviolence and difference for more than a decade, and I would say that only a minority of students became really dedicated to it, but even though they are not allowed, many students, but they are very dedicated and bring it into their work. So it depends on how you would count as effective. The issue with identity is complicated. Some students need more of affirming their self-identity rather than unsettle it. So always depends on the contact. The issue is when identity becomes fixed and the ego becomes over-investigated to it, then that will easily leads to the division within the self and the separation between the self and the other. I combine pedagogical attunement and the nonviolent intervention. People thought nonviolence is just to play nice, and I don't think any student of mine would think I'm playing nice in teaching, because nonviolence is also an intervention. It's just a different type of intervention that based upon attunement to students as whole persons rather than imposition. And sometimes really good questions can help students to tap into the unrealized potential. And one thing that is important for pedagogy of nonviolence is time. You have to give student time along with creating other conditions. And there are lots of challenges. I don't have time to talk about all of them, but one is I have to work on myself all the time because the misconceptions of nonviolence are often related to the normalization of violence in our society. So in the beginning, most students did not approach nonviolence in a positive way. And I have become very much, grown into the ability of suspending judgment and accepting of students where they start or where they, so in the beginning of teaching it, I was always surprised, and now I'm not surprised at all because I'm kind of accepting it. And sometimes I know that in the beginning of teaching it, I had to break up the fights between students because of the controversial, nature of talking about nonviolence. So, there is emotional discomfort as a natural result of that. My approach to it is that I realize I cannot make it disappear, but I intentionally try to make it easier through all kinds of things, introducing sensory experience and things like that, creating condition, but I do not intentionally do things to make students uncomfortable as a way of provoking learning. Sometimes in social justice education, it is talked about in this way as if it's a good strategy. Maybe it's good, but I never used it. When pain happens, we deal with it. And students' own internal work is most important. When they reach breakthrough, a lot of times I had absolute no idea how it happened, because the way it works is through the internal understanding is it's not that transparent, and so the pedagogical thoughtfulness, creating conditions, interbeing, as well as working on myself all the time, has been important in the pedagogy of nonviolence.
Thank you, Professor Wang.
Dr. Schneider, do you want to take one or two questions?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we have time for some questions and answers. Feel free to either raise your hand or we have the chat open. If you're more comfortable that way, you can pop your question or comment in there. And we can have some whole discussion.
Okay, Gaston, I didn't give you a chance to respond. Do you want to respond to my response to your question?
No, I took really good notes and it was very thorough, so thank you.
Okay.
Danita has a question.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Danita.
So wonderful to be in this space today, and thanks for sharing from yourself and your book. And I'm so excited about getting a copy and reading. You spoke to my heart when you talked about nonviolence as a positive energy.
Mhm.
More than negating violence, it's a radical form of love, and that gives us the ability to shift the lens to the existence of nonviolence in life itself. And I love the experiential project that you emphasized, where students are taught to have this relationship that's not based on control. It's based upon how things are and they flow. And then Liesa brought out that connection of that positivity with looking at the relationship with mothers and that organic relationality in chapter 10. And you spoke a bit more to highlight what women have to offer as answers to help to be a positive force behind nonviolence and in curriculum. And then I noticed in chapter 11, I haven't read the book yet, but I'm going to change that very soon, that you have a chapter called Feminist Approaches to Nonviolence. So
Yes.
just picking back up the theme of the power of women, can you talk a little bit about those approaches and how that would be infused into curriculum?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments on the positive aspects. I think in the beginning, I was drawn to nonviolence was because it provides a mechanism that other things like, democracy, social justice, or even peace did not provide in saying nonviolence. So it is inherently, negating violence. But then as I studied and taught more, I was drawn more to the positive aspects of nonviolence. And in a way, they are all intertwined because you deal with violence. You can't deal with violence, right? You have to deal with violence with compassion, love, gratitude, all those positive energy in order to dissolve it. And it's not about attacking violence, but it's about to dissolve it or reduce it in using the positive energy. And so I see them now more kind of intertwined and providing better positions. And certainly I emphasize it in terms of the women teachers, what they can draw in order to do the impossible work. I mean, the women teachers in the US context is just doing impossible work, dealing with people, children all the time. They don't even have time to go to bathroom. And then they became the scapegoat of politicians and businessmen for their own failures, or not educators' failure. And so I think it is important that women can get in touch with their own internal energy and the positive energy throughout, intergenerationally, and to be able to sustain this kind of work and still practice violence. And some students came into my class and then they said, oh, I already practiced the nonviolence. I just didn't know the term. Because they are the ones who really, dealing with institutional constraint, their family, all those issues, but still are able to teach relatively well. And so the mother, even in feminist theory, people have negative, positive approach to motherhood, because they say motherhood can be the way to reinforce patriarchy. Or others say, oh no, they can, disrupt the patriarchy. For me, the important is what you see from the motherhood. Even if you are not mother, you have your own mother, right? And your mother have their own mother. And so the importance of foregrounding those mother's experiences, and even if you are not mother, women's ability to give birth, and giving birth itself, it is the giving birth to the other, because the kid, after they grown up, they no longer depend on you. So you have to deal with that issue of separation, interdependence, dependence issue all the time as mothers. So I would say mother has a lot to offer in terms of dealing with relational dynamics and how to disrupt controlling mechanism and letting something new to live and to create, along many other things, of course. But that's just because we talked about mothers, and that's also related to Julia Kristeva's notion of creative motherhood, letting the kids go and grow. At the same time, one is recreating oneself, one's own motherhood, womanhood as a mother. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. Thank you.
It looks like Helen has a question in the chat as well.
Okay.
Posted.
Well, I used in the beginning, I used the nature simply because nature is dramatically different from us in the sense that they do not speak back. You can talk with somebody, a human, but you cannot talk to nature in the same way. So it was because of my intention to make students to encounter radical difference. I also told them they could not select their pet because they're too familiar with it. But you can do same things with others, and if you do others, I ask them to choose somebody you have tensions with and see if nonviolence can help to shift the tension and the relationality. I don't know. Certainly, the question is, will there be an effort to bring your book to teachers? I know that the HIMSA Center, terrorist, with terrorist guidance, there was a book called Teachers Teaching Nonviolence. So it's teachers speak to teachers. That might be a better, match. My book is more kind of a academic book, and for the, it doesn't prevent me to do something different in the future, but the current book is for professors more and scholars.
Since you mentioned the Ahimsa Center, Liesa actually is a former fellow, and joining in the meeting is also Danita. who
Okay.
is from the institute, and there were two other fellows who had joined, Tazeen and Christian, but they had to sign off because, you know, people have classes and
Yeah.
everything. But I just want to take a moment because it is so difficult for people to pronounce the word ahimsa. So if you didn't pronounce it correctly and you said himsa, it actually means violence. Himsa is violence. Ahimsa is non-violence. And non-violence is the English translation of the original word ahimsa that goes, you know, several millennia into history. Okay, so it's very important to have a sense of the root word, and that is why we called our center Ahimsa Center. So don't say himsa, which means exactly the opposite, violence, but say ahimsa. Thank you for giving me the chance to clarify.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.